You're listening to How to Stan, the podcast all about both specific fandoms and fandom culture as a whole. For more information about the show and the other show that I do, 17 Karat K-Pop, visit 17karatkpop.weebly.com. You can also go to 17karatkpop.weebly.com/howtostan for more specific information about this podcast. Enjoy the show. This is UFO Culture Episode 2. Section 2, The Timeline. Picking up right where the timeline left off last week in 2016. In 2016, there was a huge WikiLeaks dump. So the Democratic Party in the USA had this big dump of private information made public, and this was during a very heated time politically, so therefore, due to that election season, that transition period between presidents, all of the current cultural and political climate meant that the emphasis during this hack was on the more politically consequential pieces of information. So what got overlooked in that mass amount of newly public information was the UFO-related inquiries. Some of the emails that were hacked belonged to someone named John Podesta, associated with the DNC. And two of the leaked emails were between John Podesta and that longtime alien believer we've already been talking about, Tom DeLonge. A 2015 message from Tom DeLonge to Podesta said, quote, "Things are moving with the project. The novels, films, and nonfiction works are blooming and finishing. Just had a preliminary hearing with Spielberg's chief operating officer at DreamWorks. More meetings are now on the books. I would like to bring two very, quote, important people out to meet you in DC." Unquote. Unclear why he put the word important in quotes in that email. Then in 2016, Tom DeLonge emailed Air Force General William McCasland. Quote, "He just has to say that out loud, but he is very, very aware, as he was in charge of all of the stuff. When Roswell crashed, they shipped it to the laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. General McCasland was in charge of that exact laboratory up to a couple years ago," unquote. So why he was talking to these officials and what he was trying to do and what his message ultimately is remains to be seen. But the significance of these emails is suddenly people realized what kind of connections he had. It gave him a new sense of credibility, and then that led to him to gain a new level of attention towards his cause as well as just towards his belief system. He also mainstreamed that type of thinking about what are they hiding regarding the alien and UFO missions and everything. He helped mainstream that thinking a bit because suddenly mainstream publications were reporting on this incident because they had been reporting on this big email dump for other reasons. But then, of course, one thing leads to another and you realize that these emails were involved as well. In an interesting coincidence, that same year, the National Institute for Discovery Science sold the Sherman Ranch to a shell company called Adamantium Holdings, LLC. Yes, named after the same material, the fictional type of indestructible material Wolverine's bones are coated in. This sale was for $4.5 million. Who to know about the following info about 2017's discoveries? David Fravor. David Fravor was a commanding officer of the Super Hornet Squadron Base. He was holding a training exercise in 2004 when he said he saw white spots on his radar screen, and others saw them too. They were moving in different directions and seemed to be defying the logistics of traditional aircraft movement. Fravor was quoted saying, "I don't think the technology was developed here, and by here, I mean this planet." The video of these white dots on the radar was made public in 2017, along with the revelation that the Pentagon had just spent $22 million on these UAPs, these unidentified aerial phenomena. This was a massive bombshell investigation published by the New York Times that year. George Knapp became a close friend to Harry Reid, who at the time was a majority Senate leader. An intriguing connection between Knapp and Reid is highlighted in this Rolling Stone piece about the history of UFO culture, which I will link to on my site, saying, quote, "After the Fravor revelations in 2017, Knapp was contacted by his old friend Reid. The senator asked him to give a multi-hour briefing to one senator who, at the time, was a presidential candidate. I can't tell you which one, but 7 senators ran for president in 2020. So one of the 7 senators who tried to run for president for 2020 in the USA was someone who wanted a briefing on this UFO info. We don't know who that was, but I think that's a very interesting detail. Anyway, the contents of the convo between Knapp and Reed remain sealed, but it must have been pretty noteworthy because it prompted Senator Marco Rubio to add new sections to the Intelligence Authorization Bill for 2021. He requested the creation of a UFO investigative agency as part of the Pentagon, and he wanted them to be able to use Congress as an intermediary in a way to disseminate verified report conclusions to the public. Basically, he wanted more transparency towards the public surrounding UFO sightings. Reed was able to persuade 2 members of the Senate Armed Services Committee to allocate that $22 million into the Pentagon budget and move that money also to Robert Bigelow's Extraterrestrial Research Center. Knapp probably played a hand in helping Reed successfully execute that mission. In October of 2017, Luis Elizondo resigned from the Department of Defense, saying, quote, "The department must take serious the many accounts by the Navy and other services of unusual aerial interference with military weapon platforms. Underestimating or ignoring these potential threats is not in the interest of the department, no matter the political contention." Unquote. Last bit of news from 2017, that was the year Corbell made this documentary called Patient 17 about these alien microchips, as he called them, being implanted into humans. September 2019 is when the Storm Area 51 event took over social media. It all started as a prank by a guy named Matty Roberts, who posted on Facebook an event called Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop All of Us, playing into that long-held belief that maybe the government is working on some sort of alien or UFO-themed project in Area 51, this secret military base, and so he, as a prank, was saying, hey, let's go storm it. They can't stop all of us. Rachel, Nevada. This is a small town that was really, really not wanting this to become a real thing, but after 30,000 people showed interest, it became a real thing. And Matty Roberts was like, wow, I wasn't expecting this, but might as well turn this into a real event. So he teamed up with Connie West, the owner of a nearby motel and restaurant, to make this a real thing. But one thing led to another, and there ended up being rival events instead of them working together. Connie West actually ended up suing, and a competing event ended up being planned. The long and short of it all is that Matty and Connie ended up as no longer business partners after feuds over finances, logistics, things like that, to the point where Roberts ended up having this whole other event. And this was when Roberts pulled out of the event that he was working on with Connie just a week before it was set to officially happen. Once she had partnered with Matty, she had also partnered with some other companies who joined this cause to make it a real festival. And so she wanted to sue all of them because she kept paying her fair share along the way during the planning process, and the others were not pitching in financially like they had agreed to. She says she spent somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 of her own money and over $109,000 in business expenses. West had been instrumental, no pun intended, in scheduling 20 bands and 2 comedians to perform. She also helped sign agreements for security, first responders, and over 100 porta potties to be present at the event. She was getting overwhelmed financially, and that's when Frank DiMaggio entered the picture. He offered to help once the financial burden became too much for Connie on her own, but on a condition. He said that I'll help you pay for this, but I get access to the event-affiliated sites and the financial records involved in this whole thing. Connie wasn't comfortable with this guy just stepping in and suddenly wanting to see all of the financial documents and other private information. 3 days after this conversation, DiMaggio issued a statement saying Alien Stock was canceled because West couldn't agree to his terms. So Connie's lawsuit says that this announcement about canceling Alien Stock was meant to, quote, cause confusion, interfere with, and sabotage the Alien Stock event in Rachel, Nevada, unquote. Roberts joined DiMaggio's event, which became the Area 51 celebration, and they called it that and hosted it in Vegas September 19th. Not only did he seem to want to participate in this version of the event because it seemed like it was more likely to pay off financially, it would actually come to fruition, but he also wanted to own the Alien Stock title from Connie, so he wanted to basically buy it off of her. He claimed he sent her a cease and desist letter, but Connie has never gone on the record commenting publicly on that, except to say she hadn't received any such letter ever. When this rival event was created, Roberts issued a statement saying, quote, in short, the relationship has ended permanently and Alien Stock will be moving to a safe, clean, secure area in downtown Las Vegas. We are not interested in, nor will we tolerate any involvement in a Firefest 2.0. We foresee a possible humanitarian disaster in the works, and we can't participate in any capacity at this point. Alien Stock is a brand that stands for unity and concern for like-minded people. It's grown into much more than a location. It's a phenomenon that can only promise absolute safety and peace, and we need to move the festival to guarantee that. Stay tuned for more news. It's big. So despite her partners exiting the project so last minute, West was able to pull off a Rachel, Nevada alien stock. Only approximately 6,000 people showed up, so not anywhere near the 30,000 that they had expected, but that was very much a relief for security and just the citizens of that area, people who were very concerned about witnessing a bunch of just chaos in the town that day. The Area 51 event that actually did end up happening in Rachel, Nevada, is a really interesting microcosm of ufology and alien believer circles and fans of UFO culture in general. Because at this gathering place, there were the best and the worst traits of any fandom. There were people who were there to just jam out to the music, although only one of the scheduled 20 bands actually ended up showing up, the band called Wiley Savage. But it was also just a chill way to hang out for a weekend with fellow believers who would come of their own accord. Some people were dressed like they were going to a Comic-Con for ufology. There were people who were very loud and proud about their beliefs, very eager to talk to reporters. It was just a gathering of people who were non-judgmental about these beliefs and just as passionate about discussing them. So those constructive conversations, just constructive in terms of critical thinking, debate, healthy debate, and skepticism, and those kind of traits you can get out of group discussions, those were present there. But then there are also, of course, the dark sides of fandoms there as well, because at the end of the day, the whole event was built not on unity, but on division, because there were separate events that ended up being rival events. So then you could have that infighting within these ufology communities about, oh, you went to that event, why'd you go to that event? There was also the chance for actual physical fights to break out, and of course debates can become incredibly not constructive. But there was only one arrest. Things didn't get too wild at this event. Only one arrest. It was for public urination. And there were no actual break-in attempts at any time to storm Area 51. So if it has secrets, those remain to be seen. Which is another interesting detail, because there were no attempts to storm Area 51. The fact that there were no break-in attempts makes me think that they were there for keeping the suspicion alive, for being with other fans of something to say, yes, this is important for us, yes, this speculation is fun to have, and these questions and suspicions are fun to arouse in discussions. And if we discover, though, that there's nothing there at Area 51, if we actually did break in and pulled back the curtain to see the man behind the curtain, there would be no one there. Maybe just out of a subconscious fear of suddenly realizing that your ultimate life passion wasn't real. Maybe that fear of that being a revelation stopped them from even possibly discovering that revelation at all. If you ignore proof, then you can act like that proof doesn't exist, and maybe that's part of the reason why they didn't want to see the real secrets at Area 51, because that might end up not being what they had hoped for. They built this up so much in their minds as a big, important revelation, and if it wasn't, then suddenly their expectations would be crushed, and they would be crushed. Because what's fun is not actually the discovering, it's the speculating, it's the feeling like you're on that path to discovering. It's the journey, not the destination. Because 2020 was the year of coronavirus and so many other terrible news stories, news really flew under the radar that is when the Pentagon released 3 new videos of unidentified aerial phenomena the Navy had spotted. The Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force program elaborated on these efforts in a June 2020 Senate hearing. This was a program designed to basically streamline, compile, and analyze these UFO sighting reports. There was a Senate hearing requested by Marco Rubio, who received closed-door briefings about UFO footage. He saw it as a big national security concern that Congress should spend time talking about. They didn't end up moving forward with any investigations or hearings, though, for a couple of reasons. One was, of course, the pandemic changing priorities and time constraints. 2 was just an unwillingness to testify. And 3, some politicians themselves feared a PR crisis. They didn't want their name associated with this project whatsoever. 4, of course, would be a genuine just disinterest or disbelief in this type of thing. So there was a multitude of reasons why these hearings fell flat and didn't lead to any revelations, again speaking to an interesting greater possibility that the mystery is what draws people to this type of thing. Not the answer so much as the quest of finding those answers and sharing possible hints and revelations with others. This task force approval was officially confirmed in August of 2020, and this was going to kind of be similar to Luis Elizondo's program. So where are all the characters that I've talked about in the timeline so far today? Bob Lazar owns a science supply company in Michigan. He no longer gives any interview requests and often expresses regret for what he said in the past. He says he never wanted that kind of attention on his work. He viewed it as a moral duty to alert the public, but did not view it as he wanted to be known as that guy talking about UFOs and aliens. He said, quote, "Look, I'm not out there giving UFO lectures or producing tapes. I'm not in the UFO business. I'm trying to run a scientific business, and if I'm the UFO guy, it makes it really difficult for me. It is to my benefit that people don't believe this story. So when somebody says that they don't believe my story, I say, great, pass it around. I don't want you to believe it because it makes life difficult for me." Unquote. Betty, who was a part of the couple who decades ago saw that thing in the sky and thought they had a big abduction experience, and then under hypnosis they realized, that's when they suddenly remembered this whole alien encounter after hypnosis. She continued a life of UFO research, and she later claimed that she'd interacted with several more aliens on different occasions. The AATIP program is no more. It lost all of its funding and couldn't get any more because of no one in Congress wanting to be the person associated with giving funding to that kind of program right now. And George von Tessel, the man who dedicated his life to fulfilling that vision he had, telling him to build the Integratron, is now used today as what's called a sonic healing center, run by three sisters who basically create a soundscape environment. Section 1 of this series of episodes looked at the characters, the key characters involved in ufology. Section 2 we just finished, which looked at the timeline of major significant events in the world of ufology and alien believers. Now next week we're going to tie everything together and look at the psychological, sociological ways that pop culture has been influenced by this ufology, how much public opinion has changed towards belief in the extraterrestrial life forms, how much all sorts of different factors have influenced public perceptions of the world of aliens and UFOs, and what it all means, digging more into the religious groups and other super dedicated groups of believers, how they dedicate their lives to this and why, and really just looking at that from all sorts of angles. So stay tuned, part 3 out next week. Thank you all for listening to part 2 today, and I will talk to you all soon.